Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating book, Morgan Housel's Same as Ever. The whole idea is that the secret to figuring out the future isn't about predicting what's going to change, it's about understanding what's going to stay exactly the same.
So let's kick things off with the question at the heart of the book, which Jeff Bezos just frames perfectly. He says, everyone wants to know what's going to be different in 10 years. But he argues the real question, the much more important one, is what's not going to change. And that one little flip in perspective, well, that's the foundation for everything we're about to talk about.
Now, before we can really appreciate why focusing on these timeless human behaviors is such a game changer, we have to start with a pretty humbling truth. And that is that our world is incredibly fragile, and a huge amount of what happens to us comes down to nothing more than pure chance.
And Housel doesn't just tell us this, he shows us, with a story from his own life that is absolutely gut-wrenching. It's about the scariest day he ever lived through, a day that completely rewired how he sees the world and the massive role that luck plays in it.
Okay, so picture this. It's Squaw Valley. Housel is just a teenager, a ski racer. There's been a huge blizzard, and he and his two best friends, Brendan and Brian, decide to do what a lot of kids would do. They're going to ski out of bounds.
And get this, on their very first run, they actually set off a small avalanche. But, they're young, they feel immortal, so what do? They just laugh about it. They thought it was amazing. No big deal at all.
So they hitchhike back up to the top, and his friends are just buzzing, totally amped up, ready to ski that exact same dangerous line a second time. But Housel, for some reason, he puts the brakes on. He says no. And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why? Why did he back out? He says he's replayed that moment in his head 1,000 times, and to this day, he has no logical reason. It wasn't some smart risk calculation. It was just a feeling. And that random feeling, he calls it a complete fluke, the most important decision of my life. Because on that second run, his two best friends were killed in a huge avalanche. A single thoughtless impulse saved his life. And it's just this incredibly powerful example of how much of our lives are steered by pure random luck.
So a story like that really forces you to completely rethink what risk even means. It turns out the biggest dangers we face are almost never the ones we see coming. They're the ones we don't even think to worry about. The book gives this brilliant definition of risk. It's not the stuff you can list out on a spreadsheet. No, real risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything. It's the total surprise. And this story just illustrates the point perfectly. I mean, think about Harry Houdini. The guy could escape from anything he prepared for. Chains, underwater safes, you name it. He was the master of known risks. But what killed him? A surprise punch to the gut backstage that he wasn't braced for. It ruptured his appendix, and that was that. The risk he never saw coming was the one that got him.
And this isn't just about individual stories. Think about it on a global scale. The most important world-changing events of our time, 9/11, the COVID pandemic, even the Great Depression, they were all huge surprises that basically nobody was ready for.
Okay, so if the world out there is so unpredictable, what can we actually control? Well, Housel argues that the biggest lever we can pull is an internal one. It's all about managing our expectations.
For example, let's look at the 1950s. A lot of people feel this nostalgia for that era. But if you look at almost every objective number, income, the size of our homes, how much we spend on food, we are way, way better off today. So why doesn't it always feel that way?
Exactly. If we have more money and bigger houses, why did that period feel like such a golden age of prosperity?
Well, the book argues that one of the biggest differences was that wealth was just more evenly spread out back then. The gap between your life and your neighbors' lives was a lot smaller, and that made it way easier to keep your expectations grounded because you weren't constantly seeing people living these wildly different super-rich lifestyles.
And this gets to a truth about people that is just timeless. Montesquieu nailed it almost 300 years ago. Our happiness isn't just about what we have, it's about what we have compared to other people. Like the book says, the world isn't really driven by greed. It's driven by envy.
And all of this brings us right to the core takeaway of the book. The best way to deal with a future you can't predict isn't to guess what's going to change. It's to get really, really good at understanding the things that will never change.
So what are these things? Well, they're the bedrock of human behavior, right? Greed, fear, envy, risk, our tendency to get overconfident or to stick with our tribe no matter what.
It doesn't matter what new tech comes along, you can bet that 500 years from now, people will still be driven by these exact same forces. And this is the real secret. If you can get a deep understanding of these constants, you have a durable advantage in life. It's a genuine superpower for navigating your career, your investments, and your life. A power that trying to predict the future will just never give you.
So how do we actually use this? Well, maybe the most practical bit of wisdom comes from the legendary Charlie Munger, who said, "The first rule of a happy life is low expectations." Now, that's not about being a pessimist. It's about being a realist and taking control of the one part of the happiness equation that is entirely up to you.
And that leaves us with one final, really powerful thought. What if you just stopped? What if you stopped trying to predict what's going to change and focused only on what will stay the same, on human nature, on risk, on your own expectations? What would you do differently tomorrow? Maybe instead of always asking, what's next, the better question is, what's forever?